Good morning to all our attendees from my side. And I think the first thing I just want to remind you about the Plumbing Industry Awards that is happening on the 28th of July. Please book your seats, come and join us, let us see what's happening in the industry. And then I just want to remind you as well that the nominations for the Plumbing Business of the Year, the Plumbing Retailer, and the Manufacturer of the Year are open, and they will close by tomorrow. So if you do have anybody that you want to nominate, please go and do that so that we can have that information and the selections can take place. Then I want to also welcome Steve. Steve, you got a couple of words before we start?
Yeah, morning, Gerrie and everyone. Thank you very much for this morning. I think this morning our guest speaker being Alvin Naiker, who's an engineer, one of those competent people that our standards talk about. And in our discussions with Alvin, there's been a couple of things that have come up. So Alvin and I have worked together over many years on some really big and difficult projects, and it really is great to have Alvin here this morning. So Alvin, welcome, and give us your introduction. Let's get going.
Morning. My name is Alvin Naik. I'm a wet services consultant. My company is Goldman Consulting Services. We do calculations and designs for wet services for fire protection, including sprinklers, medical gas, lifts, and assistant HVAC. We also do plumbing, drainage, design, calculations, etc. My mentor, as well as my teacher, was the late Jean-Pierre Lambert, a wet services engineer from Belgium, France, an international respected engineer. We designed many vast projects like most of the casinos, hotels, hospitals, etc. We work with renowned people such as the late Saul from Sun International, various architects, etc. Prior to design, we do calculation, then do designs including flow rates, implementation of local and national, international bylaws.
Alvin, yeah, we didn't hear much of that. Let me just maybe step in here quickly while we try and fix you in the background. Guys, what this is about is the rational design. We always hear, or we sometimes hear that the term of a rational design when there's a new building that's been built and now there's an audit happening and the plumber says, but I've done the installation in terms of the rational design. And the applicable standards, as you know, in our environment is always SANS 10252 Part 1 and Part 2. 10400 SANS 204 in energy efficiency, 10400 XA, which is the energy usage, and then obviously the 10254, as we all know that regarding geysers. So these are SANS codes are set, and Alvin, I'm sure will tell you. There we go with 10254. Alvin, you back up.
I think if we just go through this and while we're trying to get Alvin up and running, is that basically, from an engineering point of view, is taking all the calculations and to ensure that the design is going to deliver the flow rates required, etc., etc. And I think that's one of the key components that we see when it isn't being done correctly. So from an engineering point of view, it's how they basically put all of this together to design the pipe sizing.
If I can maybe also just come in here, Steve, is that what we must understand is a rational design is not an excuse to bypass some of these standards. And I think that's the most important part here, is that the rational design is there to design the installation in line with the standard. So the standard will always be part and parcel of this whole thing, and we still need to abide to the standards. In other words, whatever the standard tell us needs to be in there, and then the design needs to be made or needs to be done around that.
Gerrie, let's just go over to the next slide, and hopefully we can get Alvin in. I mean, we've got all the notes here. We maybe just pull it through.
Right. So who can do a rational design? Now, if you look at SANS 10254, I think everybody is aware of the situation regarding geyser installations. where if the geyser installation is 250 liter or more, there needs to be a rational design for the roof structure and or the platform that this geyser needs to be put on. And in SANS 10254, it says clearly in 4112, where some of the provisions of the standard cannot be applied, the installation shall comply with the details given in a rational design developed by a professional engineer. And I think that's what this is all about. You know, a lot of people claim to be professional, but are they actually professional? And then if we look at 10400, where it describes a rational design means any design by a competent person involving a process of reasoning and calculation, and which may include a design based on a standard and or other suitable documents. So the person who is qualified by virtue of his education, training, experience, and contextual knowledge to make determination regarding the performance. So you might get some plumbers that say, but you know, I've got a lot of experience. I've been in this industry for a long, long time. So I feel that I'm competent, which is not the case. So in that instance, we need to have a professional engineer, architect, or whoever the person is, that is competent and has got the qualification to do calculations and can design this. Steve, anything from you there?
Yeah, I think I agree with you there in terms of the rational design. We have this, you know, all too often when we come through and we see the plumber, you know, he's designed it, and a lot of these calculations and flow rates and etc. don't meet the minimum requirements, and then it becomes a challenge. So again, the standards are very clear in terms of that. So if you go through the next one, Gerrie.
Okay, so here's the explanation of a competent person in terms of SANS 10400, which is the building regulations. And once again, it just reiterates what I said earlier. And in subsection 2, it says a competent person who is registered in an appropriate category of registration in terms of the Architectural Professionals Act. So obviously, I think it's quite simple to understand that your plumber most probably will not be registered in that arena. So yes, we need to make sure that whoever this person is that is appointed is registered and is qualified to actually do this. And in number 3, it says an approved competent person who satisfies the requirements of sub-regulation 1 on the top in respect of a system, measure, facility, parameter, or installation shall inspect and certify on completion. So in other words, that person who is doing the rational design also needs to afterwards inspect the installation and certify. And that, I think that is one of the crucial factors where we sometimes miss the point as plumbers, that we do the installation, but this person does not come back to inspect it and certify that it's been done in line with that rational design. And I think that's a very important part for you guys to understand and also to uphold in future going forward when you're dealing with new installations, construction sites, you know, these developments. Steve?
Yeah, I think also remember, you know, as those that are licensed and issue certificates of compliance, what we found often is where the plumber submits the certificate of compliance, taking responsibility for the installation, which is great and there. But the key component is to ensure that you make note that you followed the rational design of a competent person, because it won't be the first or last time that we've gone to a job and there are certain items or that we pick up on site that are non-compliant. And again, it's just that communication between the plumber. When you got your plans, ask the relevant questions to it. But when you submit that documentation stating that you've done the installation and everything is compliant, and the auditor goes out to site, pulls out the standards and starts looking at everything, then the responsibility is with you. You've signed it, but then is keep the details of that competent person so that we can measure who it is. And then in some instances, we'll go back to the architects or the engineers, bring them to their attention. But the key thing is to start that before the process starts of the work and not after the fact. It's always difficult to go back and try and rectify things at the final last minute. But you know, these things in communication could have been done prior to that when you first got your plans, etc.
And I think the important thing is, Steve, what you mentioned is on your COC, when you do the COC document, obviously this doesn't stop you from issuing the COC for that installation. However, on your installation details, note in there that this installation was done in accordance with the rational design by whoever the person is, and then get a certificate or that certificate of completion from that person and attach it. Then I think you've covered all the bases and you can move forward. So what does deemed to satisfy wording mean? Steve, you want to come in here quickly?
Yeah, I think this is one that would have been important for Alvin, and we'll pick up on next week. But again, we have this sort of deemed to satisfy rule that comes out. We must just remember, that again, it needs to meet the minimum requirements, etc., etc. So just by putting a pipe over a bath or doing this and saying, well, it deemed to satisfy who? You, the plumber, or the requirements of the standards, etc., etc. So I think in terms of this, and again, it's like the rational design. We just need to make sure that it's in accordance with the prescribed framework. So we need to do and follow those. And you look at templates. Sorry, I got a frog here. If you're going to have a look at all of the different relevant standards with regards to structural design, dimensions, and public safety, all of those need to come into that deemed to satisfy. And I think it's something that the plumbers and some other individuals will come along and say, yeah, it's deemed to satisfy, I'm happy, and that's it. So we just need to make sure that the compliance ensures with a functional regulation. Again, we sometimes have that word that comes in, the system's functional, all very well to state that, but we need to just make sure that all of the requirements and the design are met. And again, it goes back to safety and various other factors that come into it.
Yeah, so if we look at 10400, that last section 4.2.2, the last 3 or 4 sentences, these deemed to satisfy requirements presume that if the owner adopts one or more of the following methods, the functional regulations will be satisfied. Number 1, adherence to the prescriptive requirements, in other words, the SANS codes, all of them, 252, 254, 10400, the whole thing. B, appointment of a competent person to prepare a rational design or rational assessment in accordance with the prescribed framework, and erecting a building or part thereof in terms of an agreement certificate. So those are the 3 conditions. And yeah, you will see all of them points back to the regulations as we know them. And those regulations are the minimum requirements. So we cannot bypass any of those regulations. So guys, that's where we are for the moment. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I think, and again, I apologize profusely for our issues with the internet this morning. But I think, in terms of our discussions, and we had a pre-run yesterday afternoon on this just to make sure that everything was working fine, and it certainly did. So it's not just a case of arriving here at 7 o'clock in the morning and saying, okay, we pray that everything works. We actually had an hour-and-a-half discussion yesterday afternoon going through this with Alvin. So again, I know that for Alvin it'll be a little bit frustrating, but we'll touch base on this. I think next week we've got Alvin back. We'll certainly go through and do that. But again, one of the key components that he's been talking about is testing and commissioning of the plumbing systems. So again, we'll have a discussion brief in terms of a catch up on what we've had this morning so that we can actually hear from Alvin, and then obviously go into his presentation with regards to testing and commission of the plumbing system. So again, if there's any questions, I know there's some questions that have come up here in terms of that, Karim.
Yes, we've got a question from Lawrence. The question is, this is very important. Can we get updated paperwork if still got a 2013 handbook completed by Mervyn Jordan?
Yeah, that handbook's going back to one of the first ones that was ever printed. So that's gone back quite a while. There is information on our system, on the LMS system, etc., with regards to all the updated documentation that's around. So Lawrence, if you want to give me a shout, we'll be able to guide you in terms of that. Any other ones there, Karim?
Yes, we've got another question from Lawrence. Where can we get a green architect building designer?
I'm sure that Alvin will be able to help us with regards to that. Also, just to put you in the picture where Alvin fits in, Alvin has graciously from an IOPSA point of view, put himself out there that if there's anybody that needs any assistance with design or guiding, he is available. Obviously, it's he gets quite involved with us here in KZN and various other parts of the country. So we also had the issue with structural engineers with regards to roof structures. So Alvin's also got a contact for that. So, he's very much a part and parcel of what we do. But yes, Lawrence will be able to ask him that question next week, or we'll ask him and have some indication of who we can chat to.
So guys, we also, as you know, as you've seen already, we're going to extend this into next week, where we're going to look at testing and a couple of other aspects. But I think also we will include contact information of people that might be able to assist in some of these aspects. Steve, maybe Alvin, one or two other guys that might be able to assist. Can we get, we'll get their details and display it for whoever needs it. For the intro, maybe make contact with Steve or even myself. We can try and help you get information of these guys.
Thank you very
Any
much.
other questions come up, Kareem?
I believe that's all the questions from my side. Is there anything you'd like to add? Let's start off with you, Gerrie, then we'll go over to you, Steve.
Yeah, I think, guys, this is, as you say, a very important topic that you need to understand and need to understand how to deal with it. And yeah, as Steve said earlier, it needs to go back right to the design phase before you even start work. I think that's where it all starts, is to ensure that whatever is designed is within the standards and complies to all of these aspects, and obviously the person that make the design. I think that's also important to clarify and to make sure that that person is actually a competent person as described in these regulations. Yeah, that's it for me for the moment, Steve.
Yeah, and I think I'm not going to add too much to what you've got there, Gerrie, but I think the key thing is, ladies and gents, if you've got some questions that you want to ask Alvin for next week, then please submit them through to Kareem or to Gerrie, myself, or in the appropriate way that we can actually ask these relevant questions. But I think next week, in terms of testing and commissioning of plumbing systems, we'll do the touch up on what we've missed out today. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Gerrie, for backing up, and Bianca for helping us yesterday and this morning. I look forward to chatting to you all next week, and thank you. Stay safe and behave.